Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Aaron. I work for the Center for Suicide Awareness again. Today, I have somebody that I met through the center, actually, and his name is Justin Rank. Justin has a very awesome story, like I've said in the past, and it's kind of neat that he is willing to share it with everybody. And he shared it with a bunch of people that we've had throughout the couple weeks that we've really had the center open. But or the new building, rather, spoilers that nobody knows about. So it's kind of awesome. And he's got this really amazing, unique story that I really can only have you listen to. But anyway, welcome, Justin.
Well, thank you for having me, Aaron. And I guess just to kind of fill everybody in, I've been working with the Center for Suicide Awareness now for probably just over a year and a half, 2 years now, which is crazy how quickly that's gone by. So I do work in the Appleton area, work in HR as a talent acquisition lead for a company here locally. And I've been doing that for a while, but I'm from Ripon and grew up there, went to college there. Yeah, I've got quite an interesting story and things that I want to share with people and hopefully make a positive impact and use that.
So when you started talking with us, though, you said you wanted to actually get into speaking for the center, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Doing it for the center, number one, but then also it's always kind of been a dream of mine, I think, since college. So my education actually centered around argumentation and public speaking. And that really kind of stoked a flame for me about the passion I have for connecting with people and talking to people and sharing my story and realizing that, holy shit, I've got something that's pretty powerful that can help people.
Yeah.
So,
and it's you really do. And the story is, I've heard it twice now, I think. And each time I keep thinking, I'm like, how you've gone through some of the stuff that you've gone through, man. I don't even understand that. And I can't understand it, but it's.
Yeah. Me either sometimes.
Yeah. Right. Right. Ease into it, whatever you want to do, man.
Yeah. Well, this is something I've done a lot. And now it's gotten to a point. Well, actually, let's take a couple of steps back. When I first started speaking and sharing my experiences, it was therapeutic for me. It definitely helped me kind of get things out there. And I've recognized the stigma around mental health. And there's all kinds of religious connotations and things that come from suicide. And it's an ugly topic for people to talk about, and it's uncomfortable, especially when you get into mental health and the gray areas when you see people that, use it kind of as a crutch. Yeah. And in a lot of ways, they kind of take away the importance and powerful impact it has on people that truly are affected by it with anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts and everything and other things that lead to that.
Yeah.
So I was doing it as a means of therapy in college, and I started out just a couple of opportunities I had were going to the Boys and Girls Club and speaking with one of my friends that I'll get to in a little bit. But that really just planted the seed in my mind that, there's a purpose I have out there. It's just a matter of being able to do it when I'm ready. And finally kind of started to get to that point. Yeah. And there's been steps back, but so I guess to start things off, let's see. So I'm 30 years old. I was born back in 1989. My mom, she had me when she was 17 years old. And my dad was never really in the picture. And quite frankly, I didn't even know he existed until I was probably 8 years old. Yeah. So he decided to show up when my mom was going to be going through her second divorce. Okay. And I had a sister that I was raised knowing that she's just 100% my blood sister. Her dad's my dad kind of thing. Right. And come to find out that when my father wanted to kind of make himself known and be a part of my life in some way, her dad wasn't my dad. And that was kind of a little bit of a shocker. Like, who's this dude showing up with a pair of Nikes? But I gotta tell you, it was a surprise to me because that was the first shock in the sense that, like, things aren't the way that I thought they were.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of created this thing, like this early feeling like I never really had a true dad, if you will. That was more so, I guess, directed towards my grandpa.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandpa and my grandma, who on my mom's side, they really helped raise me a lot, because with my mom having me at 17, she's young. There's a lot of growing up to do.
Sure.
I'm 30. I still have growing up to do. And I can't imagine having 2 kids by the time you're 19.
Right.
And you're going on your second marriage. And, she was also dealing with a lot of things. So this is kind of a little bit of information about some of the things that she was going through, but she struggled with drug abuse.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure to the extent of what those things were, but I know that she had spent time in rehab, and those were times that we spent trips at the grandparents with grandma and grandpa. And there were times I can remember with my mom in particular where she'd show up like hours late for picking us up, and my grandma would just be pissed off at her. And obviously when you've got addictions and things, it hurts relationships, and going on a second divorce and whatnot, it definitely wasn't great.
When you experienced that, like, how old were you?
I was 7 or 8 years old, so I didn't know anything that was going on at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to be a point where so if I take a look back, we're, let's say, first grade, kindergarten through third grade, I was in a different city, in a different school district, with different friends every single year.
Oh my God.
So that was definitely an adjustment for me, and it kind of made me more shelled up.
Yeah.
I never had a problem making friends, but at the same time, it just kind of set the tone for a lot of things later in life. Mm-hmm. There was a while there where my mom went from relationship to relationship, and new father figures in my life, and then the one consistent I had was my grandpa. And my grandpa was always somebody that was a character in the community, is beloved. I mean, he's a guy that you'd go out to hardware stores in town, bring me along, and I'd have to like drag this guy's wallet out of his pocket just so he could get the hell out of there. And I'm not banging my head against the wall, like trying to get the hell home. Right. So he knew everybody, and he was a guy that was, when I say charismatic, my grandma always kind of was like, I wouldn't say he's charismatic, but he was great with people. He was funny, and he was just confident in himself. Yeah. And the hardest working guy I've ever met. So I always looked forward to time with my grandparents. Mm-hmm. And anyway, so my mom, my sister, half sister, we wound up moving after her second divorce. So we were living in Fairwater, Wisconsin for a while, and we were living above a bar that my mom and her then husband were running. And then we wound up moving a couple different times before she settled in a relationship with a guy from Berlin that I still keep in touch with. And I remember one specific night where in literally the middle of the night, she wakes us up and she's kind of hysterical and basically grabs us, takes us to our grandparents' place, and we wound up staying there. Mm-hmm. And come to find out, what led to that was that the guy in the situation, the boyfriend, had found some paraphernalia of hers in her checkbook. Okay. And I found that out just last year. Yeah. And so he was like, you know what? I don't want to have that shit in my house, and you got to clean up your act if you're going to be here. And obviously she didn't like that a whole lot. And my mom was a fireball. Like, you didn't mess with her. Anyway, we wound up getting an apartment in Ripon, which is where my grandparents lived as well. Mm-hmm. And we were staying there. I think it'd probably been a couple of months that we'd been there at that point. And I just got done going to school in Berlin, the third, fourth school in the last 4 years. I was always an inquisitive kid. I was always interested in learning in school. And it was at this point that I was kind of enrolled in. So Ripon College had these summer courses for younger students where they go out, collect insects in the field, and, mount them up or whatever. So I was doing that, and I was enjoying it, and it got to be around the time of my 9th birthday. So it was roughly 2 or 3 days before that. And my mom, we were just hanging out in the living room, and she had gotten a call from my grandma, and she brought up the idea of going over to the grandparents' place for the weekend. And so she passed me the phone, and grandma was on the other end, and she's like, "You want to come spend the weekend with us?" I was like, "Hell yeah, dude!" Because I love my grandparents. They're basically my part-time parents.
Absolutely. Right?
So then we're there for the weekend, and Monday rolls around, and I've got to go to the classes that I'm taking in the summertime, and I've got my new bike that I got for my birthday, and my grandma for over 30 years actually ran a hair salon on Main Street in Ripon called Hair Today. So after I got done with classes, I would ride my bike and head there every single day. And when I did that this time, I walk into the front door, and it was immediately different. You could tell that there was something off in the room. And like I said, I'm 8 years old at this point, 2 days away from being 9. So the lady at the front desk is absolutely hysterical. She's in tears, and this is the craziest thing is I specifically remember going up to her and saying, "Did my mom get in a car accident?" And I just don't know why.
Like randomly, that was your first thought?
Yeah. And I can't remember the reaction of the lady, but I can only imagine that she was kind of taken aback. And she basically said that you need to go and talk to your grandma. And this was the first time that the entire business was entirely empty. There's nobody in it. And if you go into a hair salon, there's mirrors on each side of each booth. And, I'm this little kid with like a Power Rangers backpack, rocking shorts and spiked up bleach blonde hair, which I no longer have, by the way. Right. And I'm walking down it, and I just can see this so clearly in my mind. And I get to this back room, which is the break room, and my grandma's in there, and she's pretty hysterical. And, I'm not sure what led to the conversation, but ultimately she wound up letting me know that my mom was in heaven. And when I got that news, I've actually asked my grandma how I responded to that, and she just said I just stood there.
So you don't remember your reaction at all when that?
I do. I remember just kind of standing there and just being unable to process it. I don't know what you mean.
Like somebody told you something and you're just kind of stone.
You're kind of in a state of shock, if you will.
Yeah.
And so there were a couple of things leading up to the funeral after that really just kind of shook me. So the first was we were somewhere, I don't even know where the hell it was, but somebody's house, and we met up, and my dad all of a sudden shows up, like my biological father shows up, and basically makes it known that he's gonna try and get custody of me. He wants me to live with him, and I have no knowledge of this guy. I've literally spent about an hour with him, and
your entire childhood.
Exactly. Right.
Wow.
Nothing. And my mom is just gone. I haven't even processed that. And now that's another layer that's thrown at me. And then my sister's dad shows up to the same spot and basically says, well, I'm going to take her and get custody of her. So that basically means everything that I have is going away.
Right. Yeah.
So I specifically said to my grandparents, this was like, I don't want to go anywhere. This is where I want to be. You guys are all I have. Then, and I'm still kind of in autopilot, still in a state of shock at this point. My birthday happens, don't even really care. And the shitty part about it was I remember my grandma giving me basically a trash bag of gifts that were from my mom after she had passed away. And I still remember some of those things, like a Tasmanian devil, like little fan. It's like a purple, like scrunchy thing. And it's got like a blue fan thing. I can remember it real well. But so all this stuff is happening. And when I look back on it, I'm not processing it at all. Yeah. And then the funeral happens. And I remember it real vividly in one specific part. And there's the line going up to the casket where you get to see them. And my mom, she had actually overdosed on pills. I'm not sure what they were, but so she was preserved. But you get up there, my sister's in front of me. And I remember that my mom was wearing this red fleece sweater, and she was wearing a gold seahorse necklace that I had gotten for her at basically a book sale at Berlin Elementary School.
Yeah.
And, I remember my sister rubbing her hand on my mom's chest and just kind of hearing the static and like kind of the fibers of the sweater just catching her fingertips.
Yeah.
And it was after that when things kind of hit me like a freight train. So we get back to my home, and I specifically remember telling my grandma, like, it doesn't look like Mom. It doesn't look like it's her. And then we get home, and, you know, my uncle, my grandma and grandpa are there, and we've got some other friends there, I think. But all I can remember is that I had this emotional flood where I just lost my shit.
Yeah.
And I couldn't be comforted by anybody. And the only person that I felt could comfort me was my mom. So anybody that was like, I was hysterical, like literally hysterical from an emotional standpoint. I was a mama's boy, and I just, everything was coming out. And I was running around trying to get away from people because I didn't want them to be there. They weren't the person I wanted there.
That's kind of a common reaction with somebody that wasn't in your situation. Wants to comfort you. They want to be there for you. Yeah. And the only thing that you want is to just be alone and just process it by yourself. And I think that's got to be a really normal reaction.
Yeah. I think it's a normal reaction, especially when you are at a point where you're so emotionally devastated that you are literally at ground zero of vulnerability. People are seeing you 100% unmasked emotionally, and that's a really scary thing.
I can tell you, I don't really like that either.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that you grow up and you're never emotional, or you're raised in a family that it's okay to do that. It's probably something that you're never going to want to do. Yeah. Especially in that situation.
So after this all happened, and I'm a little bit of, current, jumping into the now present here. I've, for the last year and a half, have been spending regular time in therapy to kind of understand and process this stuff. And we'll get to that in a bit. But, the one thing that's been made very clear to me is that was one point where I realized that there was like kind of this emotional shut off, this wall that I put up. Where even though I consider myself a really transparent guy and really willing to be vulnerable, I don't really care for anybody to get close enough to see the emotion, the amount of pain and whatnot. Because I don't think that anybody understands, that they can relate. Anyway. The reason why I waited until I was 30 to go into therapy is because after all this happened, right? So my bio dad shows up that I know nothing about. And by the way, I missed this part. My mom had told me before the first visit that he was abusive and he tried to kill me as a child.
Oh my God. So
not really not just me, but me and her, and probably threatened to do it when he was absolutely tanked or something.
Wow.
So the lasting image from a mama's boy who lost his mom of his dad is that, right? So you are literally in fight or flight mode when it comes to that guy. There's therapy that you have to go into when you go through something like this as a kid. And the first guy that I talked to is in Ripon, and I remember his face and I don't like it. The guy, the moral of the story from that conversation is that he said, in these situations, it's also common for people to not side with either party in a custody battle. You might get adopted. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like,
he said that to you?
Legitimately said that to me. Like, this was less than a month after everything went down.
I can only imagine that there's any therapists that are listening are just jumping through the radio right now. I cannot even imagine that.
I honestly can't even think about it from a professional standpoint, why you would think that'd be appropriate, but that's exactly what happened. And, my memory of that moment is very, very strong, and I'm not twisting it. And it really deterred me away from kind of wanting to have more conversations with people.
And to probably open up a lot more too. One sentence, something like that.
That's the only thing I remember from the whole damn conversation, except from the candy jar, because I choked on one of those. No, so that happens. And then that immediately is like, I don't want to talk to anybody about this. And you also combine that with the fact that the only person I feel that can comfort me is my own mother.
Yeah.
And she's not there. So I'm just emotionally isolated at this point, brick walls. And I get into middle school and I'm going through a custody battle, basically between his dad that I'm petrified of and staying with my grandparents in the meantime.
Mm-hmm.
So while this all transpires, my sister, who was raised with as my sister, who's my half sister, literally gets dragged out of our driveway kicking and screaming by her dad because there was no legal restriction for him to prevent him from doing that.
Wow.
And he did. So my dad legitimately could have done the same thing.
Yeah.
So luckily he didn't. And that was probably one of 3 or 4 times that I'd see my sister before the age of 16 from there. So
wow.
8 or 9 or 9 years old at this point. And she was 2 years younger than me. So she'd been through a lot, literally, probably a year or 2 before this happened. She was sexually abused, which really set her up for a lot of shit and a lot of mental problems later on. And our relationship has always suffered because of the time apart. And I always wondered, how different things would have been if we were still involved with each other. But either way, get into middle school and I've got all this pent up emotion. I've got all this stuff. And there was a point where I was just reserved. I was super anxious. And I realize now how anxious I was as a kid, because I was technically a year younger than everybody in my grade because of my birth date and cutoffs and stuff. So what that meant was everybody started going through puberty before me, which meant that I was the guy with the high pitched voice. I was the guy without hair on his legs. And I was the guy that got picked on for it.
Oh my God.
And not only that, but all this stuff that's going on, all this emotion that I'm keeping trapped inside, it results in stress. There's so much stress. And honestly, it led to me being afraid to go to school. And on average in middle school, I probably averaged about, I'd say 35 days a year where I was sick, faking sick.
Yeah,
absolutely. Because I didn't want to go get bullied. I didn't have confidence. I didn't have anything really. So, fast forward a little bit to my freshman year, and throughout this whole process, by the way, I have to carry my dad's name legally. So
legally, you did?
Legally, I have to carry my dad's name, and I'm like, that's not my freaking name. And in yearbooks, I've got his name, and rank is in abbreviations next to it, and it's just like, dude, I don't even know this guy. I don't want anything to do with this guy, and I would just find reasons to not spend time with him. And when you go through a custody battle, there's a lawyer or a guardian ad litem who kind of acts as the median for the child in that process, and I would literally tell her anything I possibly could to get him in trouble, to paint him in a negative light. And I would basically say to my grandma, like, I got a bloody nose, I can't go, So it kind of taught me it's okay not to deal with some of the tough shit sometimes. And there's nobody's fault on that but my own, because there's a few different things that I'll get to that kind of allowed that to happen. So one, I'm not a dumb kid. I'm not a dumb guy. But I also, one thing I got from my grandfather and watching him as I was growing up was how to, I guess, build relationships with people and what makes people like you. And seeing what got you bullied in middle school. And then all of a sudden, get to freshman year, puberty hits. And when puberty hits, I start looking a little differently. I'm working out. I'm looking pretty damn good. And that there's athleticism and confidence that comes with that. So now, I'm not missing a single day of school. I'm involved in sports. I'm friends with just about every group that you can think of, because I'm the guy that has been bullied, doesn't want to bully people, but also wants to be cool too. So we go through high school, and That's going great. And it gets to a point where it's my senior year, and all of a sudden, I get a call from my I'm at a coffee shop in downtown Ripon and hanging out with some high school friends, and I think a girl that I liked at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I get a call from my grandma saying, "Hey, your sister is at the hair salon. Apparently she ran away from home. I need you to go there and meet up with her."
Wow.
And I was like, okay. And I haven't seen her in legitimately like 5 or 6 years at this point.
Wow.
So I'm rocking my letter jacket with the, state championship logo on the back. And I show up and she's there, and she's looking real grungy. And she's got this 21-year-old guy who's like toothless. Oh, and the first thing she basically says to me as a 15-year-old is, "You might be an uncle." And
oh my God.
Yeah. So not a great situation. And she's also a runaway at this point. So she ran away from her dad. Turns out that her dad, when you consider her background of being sexually abused, losing her mom, getting dragged away from everything, and basically cut off because her dad's relationship with my grandparents was not great.
Yeah.
So there was kind of some resentment there, I think. And then, anyway, she never really got a chance to deal with things. She was just jacked up, man. And he sent her to Utah to live in a group home for like a year or two because of her behavioral issues.
Wow.
So, she comes back, she runs away. And, next thing you know, we're all at my grandparents' place, and she's got her crew of like 3 other dudes, and one's like this guy with a mustache and a beard. She's 15, by the way, wearing like a bandana with flames on it and a cutoff shirt in like cold weather. And they're all hanging out, talking to my grandpa in the family room. And my grandpa, he chain smoked Marlboro Reds and drank Mountain Dew religiously. In between that, riding his John Deere, mowing the lawn, and working his ass off just to kind of keep himself occupied. And so my sister's there. We're basically aiding and abetting a runaway, which is not a good thing. And after she had left, cops showed up to kind of search the place and see if she was there.
Sure.
And I don't think it was a good thing for my grandpa. So my grandpa, to this point, he'd worked probably 18 plus years at the Ripon Community Printers, and seriously the hardest working guy I've ever known in my life. One of the coolest characters that you could ever talk to. Like, I have so many things I could tell you on that front, but there was a point where I think it was just around the turn of the year, so it was rolling into 2007. And all of a sudden things started to kind of change with my grandpa. So he, hardest working guy, he started missing work a lot. And he wound up going on what I now know is long-term leave or disability for a while. He had basically told his supervisor that he was having suicidal thoughts. And he had gone through therapy, and he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And throughout high school, especially in the last couple of years of high school, I made friends with a group that we were really, really close. One of them was a emo kid, Jason, who was big into Invader Zim and just looked like your typical like nerdy gothy kid. One was Evan. Evan is a farm boy who lived down the road about 2 miles away. And his cousin Jess, Jimmy, who's a buddy still to this day, and a few others. And we always spent time at my grandparents' place, and we'd be playing Rock Band, and my grandma or grandpa would be shouting down the basement steps like, "Shut the hell up! This is obnoxious." Rock Band was not quiet back then,
right? No,
and anyway, we were all tight, and we'd honestly stay up on school nights just shooting the shit with my grandpa in the family room and talking about whatever. And we all had that relationship with my grandpa. So there was a point where, we had a couple of these situations where we're, out talking to my grandpa, and all of a sudden, like, he's moving in slow motion. His like hands are like elevating like super, super slow. And he's like putting cigarettes in backwards and trying to light them, and the lighter's way off over to the side, and I've got to help him do that.
Yeah.
And it turns out that that's a symptom of severe mental problem. If you're moving in slow motion. And there got to be a point where I decided I was going to go to a party on some weekend, and I was in track at this point, and wound up getting busted for an underage. And when you do that, you got to sit out 2 track meets. So the first one, it was a cold day in April. It was April 17th. And so this is my senior year. I'm about to graduate. And I'm sitting there, and I wore shorts like a jackass. And it's cold, it's windy.
Like any high school kid.
Yeah. And I'm supposed to be measuring the long jump pit as part of my punishment. And I had the Nokia phone that had Snake on it. And it turns out those things, if you drop them in a deep fryer, they do still work.
The brick, right?
Oh,
yeah, of course, right.
Yep. So I got a call from my grandma on that phone while I was there. And I guess kind of to set a little bit more context to this, because I was cold wearing shorts, I was like, yeah, I'm going to run home and get some different gear. So I get home, and my grandpa is sitting at his desk in our family room, smoking cigarettes, just drinking Mountain Dew. And for some reason, and I don't know why this is a theme and why this happens, but for some reason I stopped at the doorway on my way out. I looked at my grandpa and I said, Grandpa, I want you to know I love you, and I don't want to see anything happen to you. And he said, I love you too, man. So I leave, and then fast forward to Grandma calling me. I answer the phone, and I can basically not make out any of the words that she's saying except for a couple, and that's basically don't come home. And there was a family friend that lived in town that I wound up going to, and there was other family friends there. And as soon as my grandma made that call, I knew in the back of my head what the hell happened. And I get there, and the family friends that I have are in tears, and all I ask him is he gone? And there was Carlene is her name. She's kind of like somebody who, for some reason, was brought into my life because she was dating a distant relative. And we wound up meeting her, and basically my grandparents being at the age that they were, they didn't want to travel or do fun stuff all the time. So they outsourced it to Carlene.
Right. Yep.
So she was known as my foster mom, and she was there. And basically, she was the one that broke the news. And we get out there to my house, and they don't allow us to go in the house. There's cops everywhere. And within 5 minutes of me being there, an investigator's coming up to me asking me if I know anything about a gun being in the house or anything to that extent. And then it's real easy for me to put 2 and 2 together that he shot himself. And so he did end up shooting himself. He had a 12 gauge under his bed that it was an old rusty thing that had been in his shop for, I don't know, probably 20, 30 years. And after that, we were not allowed to basically go in our house for a period of 2 weeks. So we had to stay at a hotel while they basically gutted his room, which is where he did it. There was a bunch of my clothes in there, which, you can't get those back. And I remember after this happening, I had to go back to the school to get something. And I walk into the locker room, and I just see my track coach. It was one of the few times I think that I broke down in front of somebody, and there's other kids there, and they're just kind of looking at me like, I'm some freaking purple rhino walking into the building. And, because they all know what happened. And I just remember hugging my coach, and just it was kind of this release that I hadn't needed. And I drove my car past the house, and I see people basically in suits carrying out carpet and stuff and throwing it into a dumpster, and some of it's like covered in blood, and it was real messed up. And the first time we get into my house, obviously the first thing I do is go back to that room, and it's completely gutted out. It's a weird smell. You see on the ceiling where the buckshot is, where they tried to plaster it. And I actually looked around the room, and this is kind of late at night. My grandma had went to bed, and she's trying to hold it together for me, and I'm trying to hold it together for her. And I look around the room, and I don't know why the hell I decided to do that, but in one of the corners of the room, I found something, and I was like, so I grab a paperclip.
Yeah.
I grab it, and it's definitely a piece of my grandpa.
Yeah.
And this is not something I typically share, but I remember specifically standing over the toilet with that and being hesitant to basically flush it because it's the last thing I'm ever going to have of my grandpa. And he's the biggest influence I've had on my life to this point.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really emotional. After that, I sat down at my computer and I wrote a speech for his funeral. And I had Swing Life Away by Rise Against on repeat, and it played probably 80 times by the time I got done. Mm-hmm. And we get to the funeral, and there's probably 200-300 people there. It's a packed house, and I give this speech, and it's one of the most powerful moments and memories I'll ever have. And everybody I looked at, not a dry eye. And I just remember going through that, and now I've got to figure out college. Yeah. And I had been enrolled at UW Green Bay. I decided to change that, stay closer to home, play football, because sports and being athletic and stuff was my outlet. And I wanted to be closer to my grandma as well. And so I get into school. That's going great until first day of full pads, blow out my knee. And I'm getting carried off the field. Wide receiver coach comes up to me and says, you were going to play this year. And I was like, well, thanks for telling me.
Thanks for letting me know. Yeah.
So anyway, it was at that point that I was just like, well, I'm going to drink and I'm going to have a good time. Mm-hmm. And I never had to try in school. I didn't try then, and I was still able to get by with like a 2.5 or a 2.6. And we got to probably halfway through the first year of college, and my grandma and our relationship just really deteriorated, because to this point, my grandma, who's honestly one of the most compassionate, loving, giving people you could ever meet, but she's also got a fiery side, so don't mess with her or people. She lived for everybody else, and when everybody else was gone, she didn't know how to live for her. And so therefore, whoever was closest basically felt the wrath and the pain. And so it was my fault that she was feeling the way that she was. And it was my fault that I wasn't there enough for her. And this is all while I'm trying to figure me out. Like, this is me going to college.
This is you in your prime time.
Dude, I've got to figure out my life. This is like me trying to find me. And she kept pushing and making me feel bad and guilting me for doing that and taking my space. And it was just always this kind of stressful relationship that we had. And we go on vacation, and there was we went to Germany, actually. So I was good friends with our exchange student. Yeah. And we still keep in touch. But we get back, and there's a point where Carlene, the foster mom, and her boyfriend, they come over, and we're sitting there, and they're talking about, well, we should get away. We should go get a cabin somewhere. And she basically suggested that, and I was like, absolutely, we could do that, have a couple beers, sit on the beach. And all of a sudden my grandma just like out of nowhere snapped at me and said, okay, Ron. And Ron is my grandpa's name. Oh. And so this is like, we're happy, and then she throws like a heated, hard dagger at me. And it was not very long after that there were holes in the wall in the basement. Like, it was bad. Wow. And since our relationship has gotten better, and she's a great person, we all go through stuff and whatnot. But anyway, we're at February of 2008. And I mentioned that my friend group, we were tight. Yeah. Got to know my grandpa well. Turns out there was Evan, the farm kid, and Jason, the emo kid. Jason was a kid who struggled with mental health. And there was one time in my backyard where I basically talked him out of wanting to hurt himself in a way. And we did that kind of collectively as a group, so I can't take all the credit. And anyway, they were over at another kid's house, a guy that I kind of never really jived with. And it turns out that they were playing around with guns, and the guns were not loaded, and they would be like pointing them at each other and pulling the trigger. And there was one situation where an AK-47 was on the kitchen table, and one of the guys, the guy that I didn't jive with, to take a picture of it, loaded it, took a picture, and then went to the bathroom. And then my friend Evan, not knowing that the gun was loaded, picked it up, pointed it at my friend Jason, like he had done all weekend, and pulled the trigger, except this time there was a gunshot.
Oh my God.
Jason was basically dead instantly. So now you've got Evan, who is, I can't even honestly begin to fathom the mental state that puts you in.
Right.
And there was a couple times where we got to do a combined speaking engagement at like the Boys and Girls Club together. Yeah. And he told me how, there was snow on the ground at the time, and he obviously had tried to help Jason and see if he was okay. And then he ran outside to try and get the blood off his hands in the snowbank. And then the cop lights showing up in the background, and he vomited in the backseat of a cop car. And like, there's just the mental state. I honestly can't. And so now I had to make a decision as to, okay, am I going to lose two friends or not? And I did the only thing I knew how to do, which was support him. And so moving on, senior year of college, my grandma gets stage 4 cancer. She fights through that, which is good. But then I graduate, and I'm like, all right, what the hell am I going to do? And I've got a job lined up. Turns out the job is stressful. I get promoted quickly. I moved to Chicago, which was not great for me. It's way out of my comfort zone. And I wasn't really grown up or adult enough to deal with that. And then a lot of different things happened over the course of the next few years that created challenges, both professionally and personally. But there was a point where I was living in Milwaukee, and I had probably moved there and lived there for about 2.5 years. And I wound up meeting somebody that I got into a relationship with, moved back up to Appleton, where I started my job up here. And we were in a serious relationship, and wound up getting engaged. And there are always concerns with the relationship, but it turns out that I'm a guy, and just to kind of give you some perspective on the impact of all this stuff, abandonment has always been a big thing in my life. So fear of people leaving, fear of me leaving people and projecting that fear on others, so that they don't feel the same pain that I felt. And so I go through this relationship. There's some ingredients that I'm concerned about. And that all comes to head on a weekend not long ago, about a year ago now, where bad decisions were made. And it led to my then best man going to my fiance's in my apartment, telling her that she can't marry me. And then this huge divide being created between every friend that I've had, because we shared close friends. I was part of a fraternity in college, and all of us were tight. And I was just in this state of shock. So the thing I wanted to do, when you have holes that are missing in your life, you want to fill it. And for me, I didn't have the family dynamic I ever wanted, and I wanted to fill that with my own. And this was the first person that I'd met, and she was wonderful. She was great, had a great family, and first great person that really truly cared about me and didn't want to leave me. And I wound up absolutely crushing them. And it's so against my moral fiber and character, and something that I still struggle with. A year later, I'm finally to a point where I can focus on my job full time. And it's taken a 1.5 years of therapy to kind of figure that stuff out. Relationships, I think, are always going to be a tricky pickle for me. So with the friends that I had, I realized that was something I'd never cut ties with people.
Mm-hmm.
I always tried to maintain a string connection to every person that I considered an acquaintance.
Yeah.
And it came out to me putting importance and weight in relationships that weren't good for me and that didn't view me in the same way. And so literally overnight, everything that I had used as a means of kind of covering the holes in my life had evaporated. Mm-hmm. And I was left to figure out what the hell is going on. How the hell could I do something like this? And I wound up getting into therapy and realizing that there's a lot of stuff that I need to work through and that I'm still working through.
Yeah.
But being aware of it and taking the time to do that has been such a rewarding process in terms of my self-awareness. It's still tough to forgive myself for that, of what I did with my fiance and my relationships. And it's always, I think, going to be hard, not only for relationships with others, but with myself.
Yeah.
So it's a work in progress, man. But either way, there's been such a huge impact because of these things. When you look at abandonment, I had to write a letter to my mom as part of something for my therapy. And I got 2 words in before I realized there's so much emotion there. And I lost my shit when I was writing. I got through Dear Mom and I lost it. And I realized that I was angry. I was really angry with her, my mom, not so much with my grandpa, but with my mom for, I think, leading me down this path of insecurity with relationships and myself. And so it's tough because I'm a confident guy. I've got the way of woo, my therapist tells me. I know how to build relationships. Yeah. But when it comes to maintaining them and letting people get close, I don't let them get too close. And that has turned out to really be a problem.
Sure.
So that's all of it. 50 minutes later.
Every time I hear your story, man, it's just, it hits me. I've never gone through anything like that before, but I can empathize with you 100%.
Yeah. And I don't expect anyone to understand it. And that's the tough part, is that you don't really feel that anyone understands it until you talk to somebody that's been through something similar. And that's why I do truly believe that I've got, even though this experience has impacted me in so many negative ways, it is a gift in a sense that, I have the ability to talk about it. I have the ability to connect with people. And I think it's my responsibility to share it.
Do you realize how important that is, though? Seriously, I am so impacted by your story. When I heard it, I said, I'm like, I need him on here. I need you to share your story with these people, because you have a very powerful message that, one, you've gone through so much shit in your life, and then you're still here. You're still fighting. You're still kicking. But what's amazing is that you're recognizing, hey, I have some faults, but I'm fixing them. When you can see it in yourself, you can fix it. And it sounds like you're on the right path to fixing yourself.
Yeah, I think it's always going to be a work in progress, and I accept that. But the big thing is just to stop running and to stop trying to distract yourself with people that may or may not be good for you, that fill a void, but also to distract yourself from facing the truths, and stop, I guess, avoiding the mirror. Take a look at it. Don't be afraid to let your walls come down, especially when you go to therapy. I mean, you've got to be totally transparent and open if you want to find any kind of a resolution out of it. And the weight that it's taken off me has been phenomenal. But I think in terms of my personal growth this past year, I've grown more than I have in the first 29.
And I totally agree with you on the therapy thing. I also go to therapy, and it's one of those things. And I always equate it to, my mind can just be this massive ball of yarn that's so strewn about and not together. And all I do is go into that office and I say, here is my yarn. Yep. Reball it for me. And and but I get that. And I'm glad that you're accepting to it, and that it's something that is helping you, because, man, I'm sitting here with you, and this is, I think, like I said, the third time I've heard your story, but I took something away from it this time that I actually didn't the first couple times. And it's the fact that it's you and me in here.
Yeah.
And there's nobody else to hear it except the microphone and you and I. It's more powerful than I think you realize.
Yeah. And I appreciate you saying that. And I in the back of my mind, I know it. But the problem I've also had is that I put a lot of pressure on myself, right?
Yeah.
So it's taken a lot for me to feel good about me and to be at a point where I feel I can get in front of people and say, you know what? I've got to bear it all, even the imperfections, because for the longest time I lied to myself and said that I'm perfectly fine and that, you know, I got through this to make the world a better place. And it was just, I'm going to go 100 miles an hour, be successful and do what I need to until I hit a brick wall.
Yeah.
And I hit a couple of them. It's been so hard to learn about yourself at the age of 30, to understand your relationships and how you've gone about that wrong. But you've got to be able to look at that. And you've got to also be able to say, it's not over, because there's a lot of people that would probably be in my shoes that would want to say that, to say the least. And I've never felt it myself, but
and kudos to you for that, because and I kind of agree with you on the fact that, you know, in my late 20s when I met my wife, I didn't recognize the fact that I had mental health issues either.
Yeah,
and it took her to say, "Hey, you need to get something looked at because this is not right. This is not normal." It took a little bit of courage for me just to go to therapy, for me to, you know, take medication, to do whatever.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, I wish I would have done that 10 years ago.
Same.
I really did, you know, and it's all in hindsight. It's all, I see it now. You know what? People make mistakes, people learn, people grow, and you get to be your best version of yourself today.
Yeah.
And that's kind of one of those amazing things that, man, your story is really impactful, Justin. It really is. And
you know, it's weird knowing that you have the ability to make a room full of people potentially cry at any given moment. But you know, it is something that I hope to take further and hopefully accomplish what I've felt is, at least since my early 20s, has always been my purpose. Yeah. Is to use my story to be the person that's comfortable being uncomfortable in front of others and sharing this stuff, regardless of what the hell they might think, because it makes sense. It honestly, the dots connect, and it took going to therapy to understand how these different dots connected and why my behaviors were certain ways. And I think that's super powerful for people, and hopefully it helps them connect the dots for themselves as well.
I've always felt being vulnerable with people opens them to be vulnerable as well. It really, even if you just share your story and somebody says, you know what, maybe that's the drive I needed. Yeah. You help that one person. God, I'm actually speechless. I cannot tell you how incredible your story is.
Yeah. And I mean, again, it does mean a lot to hear that. And I'll say the biggest impact that I think I've noticed is I'm a believer in signs, and things happen for a reason. And that's part of how I got through this. Not necessarily the best way, but there was an event in partnership with the Center for Suicide Awareness at the I don't know if it was the Suicide Summit, but it was at Mission Church last year. Okay. And this is literally shortly after everything with my fiance happened, and all my friendships are kind of fallen by the wayside. I go up there, I share my story, and I was really insecure about sharing anything about, you know, the mistakes I made with my relationship with my fiance. And,
understandable. Yeah.
I was worried about being judged, and I was in a pretty fragile mental state at the point. And I remember going up there on little sleep and just basically sharing it. And there was this lady who came up to me afterwards who, within 30 seconds of her talking to me, like, you could see the emotion, just the wall dropped and all of it came out. And she said that I reminded her of her son who committed suicide, and that she felt that I was speaking through, or he was speaking through me, and sees so much of him and me. And she's like, I just want you to know that I got so much comfort from you tonight. And for me, that's the goal. And that's what I want to do with this in my life. And
that's such an incredible feeling too.
Yeah.
I can
It
imagine.
gave me goosebumps just saying it, man. It did.
Like I said, I thank you for just sharing everything about your story. And so this whole podcast has been kind of a new experience for me too. Mm-hmm. And getting to sit down with people and really just have them bare your soul and really give people a perspective that not everybody gets to have. But what is the one piece of advice that you can give to anybody that's listening right now that is maybe struggling or maybe can feel how you felt?
Oh, wow. There's so many directions I could go with that, man. But the first thing that kind of comes to mind for me is that you need to focus on your relationship with yourself. And what I mean by that is that if you are constantly afraid to admit where your weaknesses or your deficiencies are, or cover your insecurities through other things, whether that's an outlet of addiction of some kind, or I guess like I did in college and just chasing girls and trying to find as many friendships as I could and drinking and partying and whatever. If you are constantly trying to find some kind of a quick answer or some kind of fulfillment in anything other than happiness from yourself, you are going to run into problems at some point. Mm-hmm. So if your relationship with yourself is good, that means that you're not desperately pursuing relationships with other people, and you're not clinging to those that may not be healthy for you. And if your relationship with you is good, that's all you really need. Yeah. And then the other things are just perks and positives. So take the time to invest in yourself, in your own well-being, and care for you like you would care for a friend that you don't want to lose. And when you do that, I think that's the best first step that you can take. That's
a powerful message. That really is. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, man. So, wow, just to decompress from something like that, man. Yeah. That's, I guess we're probably running towards the end here, but if people want to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
Yeah, so I obviously volunteer through the Center for Suicide Awareness. People are welcome to reach out through that outlet. But I would just recommend, reaching out through the center. And if there's anything I can do to help, great. But otherwise, I think you're going to be hearing more from me in the future as I pursue this in a different way.
I feel like we're going to see more of you in a more bigger spotlight than I think you realize. So
I hope so.
So for me to get
Not
you
for
on
my own sake.
For me to get you on a podcast like this, and then you go big, that'd be pretty amazing. But
I'll buy you whatever you want for the next whatever you want.
So if anybody wants to get a hold of Justin or get in touch with him, you can always email the podcast, and I can always make that happen. But so Justin, with the end of it, is there anything else that you want to share or anything else you want to tell anybody?
No, I think I'm good. I think I got enough out there already.
and again, thank you on behalf of the center, and thank you for just sharing your story with me, man. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And God bless you, man, because you definitely are going to make an impactful statement in life.
Appreciate it, bud.
All right. Well, thank you again, man. Appreciate it. Wow. What an incredible story, and what an incredible person. I was so happy to have him on here and to have us share his story. And I'm really glad that he was able to do it and open up as much as he did. There's a lot of really, really amazing learning points in that podcast. But just want to thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to, Podbean, iTunes, anything. Visit us on the socials, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all are at Center for Suicide Awareness in Kaukauna, Wisconsin. As always, please reach out if you're feeling down or you're having thoughts of hurting yourself. There are people there. You can always text the Hope Line, text Hope Line to 741-741. You'll be able to talk to a counselor for free. There's always people that are willing to help you through any sort of crisis or any sort of issue that you have. So until next time, on behalf of the center, I just want to thank you again for your support, being there and being an advocate for the message that we're trying to send out to people. So just appreciate it. And remember, you are not alone. Take care, everybody. Bye.